She loved him so much that she wore her engagement ring even at work. When asked why she took her victim's eyes, she replied, "I will never see my beloved again. Now, neither will they." December 1997, a suburb of Newark, New Jersey. Vincent LaRousse woke up every day at 6:30 a.m. Shower, coffee, 20 minutes to the auto repair shop on the outskirts of Elizabeth. The same routine for the past 9 years. He was co-owner of a small truck repair business that served transport companies in northern New Jersey. On paper, he was an honest entrepreneur. In reality, he was a man who, 20 years ago, had made a choice that defined his entire life. In the early 70s, LaRusso started out as a courier for people connected to the Moretti family. Small errands, envelopes, sometimes reminders to debtors about deadlines. He never rose high. He was not a made member of the family. He was simply a useful person on the periphery, reliable enough to be trusted with dirty work, and inconspicuous enough not to be remembered when things went wrong. In 1993, LaRousse carried out his last assignment of this kind. He was one of 3 who arrived at the warehouse on the outskirts of Jersey City at night. He didn't shoot. He didn't even go inside. He just sat behind the wheel and waited for the other 2 to finish. The man they left behind in that warehouse owed his family $47,000. Credit card debt, inflated by interest to an amount he could never repay in his lifetime. His name was Thomas Vitti. After that night, LaRusso left the business. He opened a car repair shop with the money he had saved over the years working as a courier. He got married and had 2 children. By 1997, he had almost convinced himself that the past was behind him. On the 14th of December, 1997, LaRousse closed his workshop earlier than usual. The holidays were approaching. There were few orders, and his wife had asked him to pick up some groceries. He left through the back door, as he always did, and headed for his pickup truck, parked 30 meters from the entrance. The car park was empty. The light above the gate was flickering. He had been meaning to fix it for a month, but hadn't got round to it. LaRousse didn't hear any footsteps. He didn't see any movement. He just felt a brief sting in his neck, like an insect bite, and the world began to slow down. The last thing he remembered before his legs gave way was a woman's silhouette, short, calm, and a quiet voice that said his name. LaRousse woke up in an unfamiliar room, a basement. He could tell by the smell of dampness and the concrete walls. He was lying on something hard. His arms and legs were restrained. He tried to move, but couldn't. He tried to scream, but his throat made no sound. Only his eyes could move freely. In front of him, within arm's reach, stood an old television set. On the screen was a frozen frame. A man and a woman in wedding attire, young, happy, dancing. And next to the television, a woman wearing surgical gloves was laying out instruments on a metal tray. A wedding ring sparkled on her ring finger over her glove. She looked up at him, calm, without hatred, without anger. And he recognized her. Not immediately. It took almost 5 years. But he recognized her. She was the wife of the man from the warehouse. She pressed the button on the remote control, and the television came to life. A wedding video, dancing, and music. The same melody, looped, repeating over and over again. At that moment, the cellar door flew off its hinges. 3 FBI agents burst into the room with their weapons at the ready. Shouts, commands, the light of tactical torches. The woman didn't even try to run. She simply placed the scalpel on the tray, slowly raised her hands and looked at LaRusso with a long, calm gaze. Then she looked at the agent who was snapping handcuffs onto her wrists and said, "You're one late. LaRousse survived, the only one of the 13 people on her list." Later, during questioning, he would tell investigators everything he knew about the events of 1993, about the warehouse, about the people who gave the orders, about those who carried them out. But at that moment, lying on a concrete table in a stranger's basement, completely paralyzed, he could think of only one thing: how little they knew about the woman they had left a widow, and that 12 people before him found out too late. To understand who Eleonora Vitti became, you first need to see who she was. Nora was born on 14th of May, 1962, into a family of second-generation Italian immigrants. Her father worked at the post office. Her mother was a seamstress working from home. They were an ordinary family from the working-class suburbs of Newark. No ties to crime, no dark secrets, just people who believed in honest work and Sunday dinners. Nora was the eldest of 3 children, and from an early age was known by her neighbors as a quiet force. She wasn't withdrawn. She just didn't waste words. She studied steadily, without brilliance, but with a persistence that brought results. After school, she enrolled in the pharmacy faculty, not out of a passion for medicine, but out of practicality. A stable profession, a good salary, the opportunity to help her parents. By the age of 25, she was working as a pharmacist in a pharmacy on the outskirts of Newark. She rented a small flat 10 minutes from work. She lived according to a schedule: shift, dinner, book, sleep. She had almost no friends, not because she was unsociable, but simply because she enjoyed her own company. She wasn't looking for love. She didn't go on dates. She didn't believe in destiny or soulmates. And then she met Thomas. Thomas Vitti walked into her pharmacy in March 1987 to buy some aspirin and plasters. He was 32 years old. He was short and stocky, with a broad smile, and a way of speaking that made everyone in the room feel like an old friend. He worked as a buyer for several small restaurants in northern New Jersey, negotiating with suppliers, monitoring prices, and solving logistical issues. The job wasn't glamorous, but he loved it. He loved bargaining, finding solutions, and feeling needed. He spoke to Nora as if he had known her all his life. He asked her which aspirin was best. Then, he asked how long she had been working there. Then, he asked if she would like to go for a coffee sometime. Nora said, no. No explanation. Just no. Thomas smiled, bought some aspirin, and left. The next day, he returned for vitamins and asked about coffee again. Nora said no, again. He came every day for 2 weeks. He bought something small. He talked about the weather, baseball, how difficult it was to find good tomatoes at this time of year. He never pressured her. He never took offense at her monosyllabic answers. He just came, as if he enjoyed being around her, even if she was silent. On the 15th day, Nora said yes. Later, she admits that she herself did not understand why. Something in his persistence, not intrusive but patient, broke through her defenses. He did not try to impress her. He did not try to appear to be someone else. He was simply there, and that turned out to be enough. Their first date lasted 4 hours. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into a walk along the embankment. They talked about everything and nothing. Thomas told stories from his childhood, how he stole apples from a neighbor's garden, how his mother beat him with a slipper for dirty footprints on the floor, how he once got lost in New York and spent the night at Penn Station. Nora listened. For the first time in many years, she didn't want the evening to end. They got married a year later. It was a small wedding with just family and a few friends. Nora wore a simple white dress. Thomas wore a suit he had rented, which was a little too big for him. They danced to a song he had chosen, an old Italian romance that his grandmother used to sing. This song will play in her basement 12 times. Their marriage was not perfect in the Hollywood sense. Thomas worked a lot and often came home tired. Nora couldn't cook as well as his mother, and for the first few years he tactfully kept quiet about the oversalted pasta. They argued about money, about his habit of leaving his socks lying around, about her inability to express her feelings in words. But they never went to bed without making up. That was their rule. the only one they never broke. In the evenings, they watched old films. On Sundays, they went to the market for fresh vegetables. Once a year, they traveled to the coast. The same place, the same motel. Thomas said that traditions were more important than adventures. Nora agreed. She changed around him. She didn't become a different person. She just opened up. She started smiling more often. She started talking to her neighbors. Her colleagues at work noticed that she had become softer. One of them would later tell investigators, after the wedding, it was as if something in her had thawed. They wanted children. They tried for several years. It didn't work out. The doctors couldn't explain why. Thomas said, "Then we'll love each other for two." Nora cried. For the first time in all the time he had known her. By 1992, they had been together for 5 years. They lived in a small house in the suburbs. Nora had been promoted to head pharmacist. Thomas had expanded his business and now worked with a dozen restaurants. Everything was fine, and then Thomas made a mistake. Card games were his only vice. Thomas never drank much. He didn't smoke. He didn't look at other women. But once a week he went to play poker with his friends. And sometimes these games took place not in garages, but in the back rooms of bars where the stakes were higher and the people at the table were more dangerous. He wasn't a gambler in the clinical sense. He didn't gamble away his wages. He didn't lie to his wife. He just sometimes enjoyed the thrill, the feeling of risk, the adrenaline rush that he didn't get in his regular job. At the beginning of 1992, Thomas found himself in a difficult situation. One of the restaurants he worked with went bankrupt, owing him a large sum of money. He took out a loan to cover the cash shortfall. The loan had to be repaid. And then one of his acquaintances suggested an easy way to make money. A private game. High stakes, good odds, Thomas went. He won on the first night. He returned a week later. He lost. He returned again to win back his losses. He didn't know that the game belonged to people connected to the Moretti family. He didn't know that interest on losses was calculated weekly. He didn't know that by the end of the year his debt would grow from $8,000 to $47,000. When he realized what a trap he had fallen into, it was already too late. Thomas didn't tell Nora. Not because he was afraid of her reaction, but because he wanted to solve the problem himself. He sold the car. He took a second job. He tried to arrange a payment plan. Moretti's people did not accept installment payments. Nora noticed the changes. Thomas became nervous. He slept poorly. He started smoking for the first time in 10 years. He answered her questions evasively. He said he was just tired, that everything would be fine soon. She believed him, because he never gave her a reason not to. On the 13th of August, 1993, Thomas left for work as usual. He kissed her on the cheek. He said he would be back for dinner. He did not return. Nora waited until 9 o'clock in the evening. Then she started calling. His phone wasn't answering. She called the restaurants he worked with. No one had seen him since lunchtime. She called the police. The body was found 3 days later in an abandoned warehouse in Jersey City. The official cause of death was a gunshot wound. The detective in charge of the case came to her house on Sunday morning. He said that the investigation was ongoing, that there were certain leads, that they would call her as soon as there was any news. They never called her. 4 months later, the case was closed. The official wording, murder under unclear circumstances. No suspects, no arrests, no justice. Nora buried her husband in a small cemetery in the suburbs of Newark. The gravestone was simple, his name, dates, and words she had chosen herself, beloved forever. She didn't cry on the day of the funeral. Her neighbors decided she was in shock. Her colleagues thought she was holding it together for her family. No one understood that something had changed in her that day, irreversibly. She returned to work a week later. punctual, neat, calm. She wore a wedding ring. She never spoke about her husband in the past tense. Outwardly, she is the same Nora. But inside, there is a mechanism that has begun to operate in a new mode. She didn't know who killed Thomas. The police didn't give her any answers, but Nora was a pharmacist. She knew how to work with information. She knew how to be patient. She knew how to wait. She began to piece it together, bit by bit. Conversations she had overheard from Thomas's acquaintances, rumors about people he owed money to, names that came up again and again. The Moretti family. She found out everything she could about them. Who controls the gambling business in the region? Who issues interest-bearing loans? Who comes to those who cannot pay? She made a list. 12 names. People who were connected to her husband's death, either directly or indirectly. Those who lent money, those who charged interest, those who made threats, those who gave the order, those who pulled the trigger. She wrote their names in a notebook. Opposite each one, she wrote down everything she knew: address, job, habits, routes. Investigators would later refer to this notebook as the blood ledger. But for Nora, it was just bookkeeping. She had worked with medications and dosages her entire life, with precise calculations and strict accounting. Now, she was applying those same skills to a different task. Nora's husband was dead. The system failed to protect him. The law failed to give her justice. And then she decided to keep her own records. She crossed out the first name in October 1994. Nora was in no hurry. More than a year passed between her husband's death and the first name on her list. For 14 months, she watched. She studied. She prepared. She understood the main thing. To do what she had planned, she needed time, knowledge, and absolute patience. One mistake, and it would all be over. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. Not because she was afraid of prison, but because the list had to be completed in its entirety. Her profession gave her two key advantages. The first was access to drugs. As the chief pharmacist of a large pharmacy chain, she was in charge of keeping track of medicines. She knew which substances left traces and which didn't. She knew the dosages. She knew how the human body worked. The second is a habit of precision. Pharmaceuticals do not tolerate approximation. 1 extra milligram, and the medicine becomes poison. Nora applied this logic to her new task. She chose succinylcholine, a drug used by anesthetists to relax muscles during surgery. In the correct dosage, it completely paralyzes the body. The person cannot move, cannot speak, cannot scream, but they remain fully conscious. They can see, they can hear, they can feel. After a few hours, the drug breaks down in the body, leaving no traces in standard toxicological tests. It is the ideal tool for those who want their victim to be helpless but aware of everything that is happening to them. The first victim was Salvatore Conti, a small-time loan shark who worked for the Moretti family. He was the one who gave Thomas his first loan. He was the one who charged interest every week, turning $8,000 into $47,000. Conti was a creature of habit. Every evening, he would leave his office, a small financial consulting firm, at 9 o'clock sharp. He would walk 2 blocks to the car park. He would get in his car. He would drive home. Nora followed him for 3 weeks. She studied his route. She timed it. She found a blind spot, the area between 2 streetlights, where the cameras of the nearest shops couldn't reach. On the 23rd of October, 1994, Conti left the office at the usual time. He reached the car park. He did not reach his car. A jab in the neck, a fall, silence. He was found a week later, in an abandoned building on the outskirts of Newark, without eyes, with 2 silver dollars in his eye sockets. Both coins were minted in 1993. The police classified the murder as a probable settling of scores between criminal gangs. Conti was known to have links to organized crime. His death came as no surprise and did not prompt any particular zeal in the investigation. Nora crossed the first name off the list. The second name took her 4 months. The third, 3. She studied. She honed her method. She eliminated her weaknesses. Her handwriting crystallized by the third victim. The pattern was always the same. The injection of succinylcholine, quick, discreet, in a public place with poor lighting. Transport to a prepared room. She used her own basement, which she had converted specifically for this purpose. Restraining the victim on a table. Waiting for the victim to regain consciousness. And then, the ritual. She secured their eyelids with special clips so they couldn't close their eyes. She turned on the television. On the screen was her wedding video. Dancing with Thomas. Their smiles, their happiness, and music. That very song. An old Italian romance that Thomas's grandmother used to sing, on repeat. Repeating over and over again. Hour after hour. She made them look at what they had destroyed. Only after that, the scalpel. She was not a surgeon, but she studied the anatomy of the eye in medical textbooks. She practiced on pig heads, which she bought at the meat market. By the time of the first murder, her movements were precise and confident. Removal of eyeballs, 2 silver coins in empty eye sockets, always $1. Always the year 1993, the year of Thomas's death. She collected coins in advance. She visited numismatic shops in different states, buying several coins at a time, always paying in cash. No traces. She left the bodies in different places, abandoned buildings, wastelands, industrial areas, never near her home, never in the same neighborhood twice in a row. She was patient. Months passed between murders. Sometimes 6 months. She wasn't after speed. She was after precision. The police did not link the cases together for the first 2 years. The victims were from different areas, different ages, different statuses within the criminal hierarchy. The only thing they had in common was their connection to the Moretti family. But to investigators, it looked like an internal feud. The Mafia kills its own. What's unusual about that? Silver coins were considered a signature. But whose? A rival family, individuals with personal scores to settle. There were many theories. None of them led to a quiet female pharmacist from the suburbs. Nora took advantage of their blindness. She knew that the police were looking for a man. Statistics on serial killings showed that women rarely acted in this way. She knew that they were looking for someone from the criminal world, because the victims were from there. She knew that they were looking for a motive related to money or power, because that's how the Mafia works. No one was looking for the widow. By mid-1996, there were 4 names left on her list. 8 people were dead. 8 pairs of silver coins lay in 8 pairs of empty eye sockets. And then something happened that nearly ruined everything. The 9th victim, Anthony Pasquale, one of the Moretti family's soldiers, was not where she expected him to be. Instead of taking his usual route, he went in a different direction. Nora followed him. He stopped at a bar that was not in her records. He got out. He went inside. She waited in the car. An hour, 2, 3. He left at midnight. Drunk, staggering, not alone. Someone else was with him, a woman. Nora had not planned for witnesses. She backed off. She left. She returned to her surveillance a week later. But that night changed something inside her. For the first time, she felt impatience. For the first time, she thought that she could have taken a risk, that she could have acted more quickly. The next 3 murders occurred at shorter intervals. 2 months, 6 weeks, 1 month. She was becoming bolder, or more careless. In her case, it was one and the same. By December 1997, there was only one name left on the list. Vincent LaRousse, the driver, the man who didn't shoot but was there that night. For Nora, he was just as guilty as the rest. She followed him for 3 weeks. She studied his schedule. She found a blind spot, the car park behind his garage. Poorly lit, and without cameras. On the 14th of December, she arrived there an hour before closing time. She parked in the shade. She waited. When LaRousse came out, she acted as usual. The jab, the fall, silence. She didn't know that she had been under surveillance for 6 weeks. Her blood ledger, a notebook with names and notes, was her pride and joy and her weakness. She kept it in a safe. She never took it out of the house. But the very fact of its existence was a problem, because someone started putting the pieces of the puzzle together, and that someone was not from the police. The person who started putting the puzzle together turned out to be a young FBI agent named David Cohen. Cohen worked in the organized crime department and had been investigating the Moretti family for 3 years. He wasn't investigating murders. He was tracking financial flows, connections, and hierarchies. But by the autumn of 1997, he noticed a pattern that others had missed. 8 people connected to Moretti died in 3 years, all with the same signature. Police in different districts investigated the cases separately, without sharing information. For each investigator, it was a local murder. For Cohen, it was a series. He requested the files for all 8 cases. He compared the dates, the locations, the circumstances, and found the first thread. All the victims were connected not just to the Moretti family. They were connected to one specific episode, usury, an unpaid debt. The murder of a debtor in August 1993. Cohen raised the case of Thomas Vitti, closed, undisclosed, forgotten. He studied the materials, found the widow's name, checked her out. No ties to crime, no red flags. An ordinary woman, a pharmacist. Cohen returned to the forensic reports. In all 8 cases, the cause of death was different: blood loss, heart failure, shock. But in 3 reports, the experts noted an unusual detail: injection marks on the neck, small, almost invisible, with no identifiable substance. He showed the reports to a toxicologist he knew. The toxicologist said, "It looks like succinylcholine. It breaks down quickly. Standard testing won't detect it." Succinylcholine, a drug accessible to anesthesiologists and surgeons, and pharmacists. Cohen checked succinylcholine purchases at pharmacy chains in northern New Jersey over the past 4 years. It took 2 weeks, hundreds of records, thousands of transactions. One pharmacy showed an anomaly, small, but regular discrepancies in accounting. The drug was written off as damaged during transport, more often than the network average. Eleonora Vitti was the chief pharmacist at this pharmacy. Cohen did not go to the police. He understood that there was insufficient evidence. Discrepancies in the accounts were not proof of murder. He needed more. He began his observation. He had been watching Nora for 6 weeks. Her home, her work, her roots. She lived like a normal person. No suspicious contacts, no strange trips. And then he saw her watching someone else. Vincent LaRusso, former courier for the Moretti family. A man who had long since retired, but whose name appeared in old documents about loan sharking operations. Cohen understood. LaRusse was next. On the 14th of December, he was in the car park behind the garage. He saw Nora step out of the shadows. He saw the injection. He saw LaRusso fall. He called for backup and followed her car to her house in the suburbs of Newark. The cellar door flew off its hinges just as she turned on the television. During a search of the house, they found everything: surgical instruments, a supply of succinylcholine, and a collection of silver dollars from 1993, and a notebook, 12 names. Opposite 11 of them are dates and the note, closed. Opposite the last name, LaRusse, there was nothing. In the living room, the agents discovered a laid table, 2 place settings, candles, a festive dinner. A mannequin dressed in a men's suit sat on one of the chairs. On its finger was a wedding ring. a matching pair to the one Nora wore. The trial of Eleonora Vitti began in March 1988 and lasted 4 weeks. The prosecution sought the death penalty. 12 counts of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances. The prosecutor called her a cold-blooded serial killer who acted with particular cruelty. The defense built its case on psychological trauma. The lawyer presented experts who spoke about post-traumatic stress disorder, about a dissociative state, about how her husband's death had destroyed her mental health. Nora rejected this line of defense. During questioning, she spoke calmly, without emotion, without remorse. She described each murder in detail, the dates, locations, methods. She explained why she chose these particular people. She talked about the coins, the wedding video, the song. When the prosecutor asked if she regretted what she had done, she replied, "I regret that the system didn't do it for me. My husband was murdered." The police closed the case after 4 months. No one was arrested. No one was held accountable. These people continued to live as if nothing had happened. "I just closed the accounts that were left open." She was asked about the eyes, why she took them. She looked at the prosecutor for a long time and said, "I will never see my husband again. Now, them too." The jury deliberated for 2 days. Verdict: guilty on all counts. Sentence: life imprisonment without the possibility of early release. The death penalty was not imposed. 2 jurors refused to vote for it, citing exceptional circumstances of the case. Nora was transferred to the Edna Mann Women's Correctional Facility in Clinton, New Jersey. According to information available at the time this case was closed, she remains there to this day. The case of Eleonora Vitti did not become widely known. It did not make the front pages of national newspapers. It did not form the basis of any documentary films. For most people, it remained a local story. According to the guards, there is a photograph in Nora's cell. A man and a woman in wedding attire, young, happy. She has a wedding ring on her finger. She has not taken it off since 1988. Some stories do not end with a sentence.